This is what I preached last Sunday night. Remember, we were going to do that. I'll do that again sometime in the future. This is what we prepared. This is what I preached. But I didn't preach it just like this. If you guys remember, those that were in Sunday school, we came up with the theme. We went to 1 Kings chapter, or was it Chronicles? I think we did 2 Chronicles chapter 7 or 10. I think it was 7. No, it might be 10. 2 Chronicles chapter 10, we preached about Jeroboam and when he took over the kingdom from Solomon and how Rehoboam and Jeroboam split the kingdom. It was Rehoboam that split it. So we talked about Rehoboam and what he did as we looked through 2 Chronicles. I think it's 2 Chronicles chapter 10. I absolutely need to open this up and look. It was 2 Chronicles chapter 10. So we preached, we came up as a class, we came up with these points from that story, and specifically we read 2 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 1. We didn't read the whole thing, I don't think, but somewhere around verses 7 till, or 6 till 13 or 4, or 14, somewhere around there. We read those verses. We came up with these points, that Rehoboam forsook the old counsel, Rehoboam didn't listen, and Rehoboam was a bully. And then from those 3 points, we came up with the theme of preaching a sermon that we could easily focus on humility as being the central theme of these points. This is what Rehoboam didn't have. He didn't have humility, but instead he was a proud man that got into a position of authority, and this is what he tried to do. He didn't listen to the older counsel. He spent time talking about that, how that God wants us to honor our parents, and he wants us to honor the older folks in the church, and a position or an elder is a position or a person of respect and honor. Of course, not much of that in the world that we live in around. Old people are people to just be discarded and put away and forgotten about, and we don't want to listen to their advice because we want to just, young people just want to live our own lives. We don't listen to old. So we talked about that quite a bit. He didn't listen, so we talked about that. We gave some Bible verses about how important it is to seek advice and to how important it is to just don't reach the conclusions yourself, but listen to other people. Talked a lot about that, and we talked about bully. So this is what we came up with in class. And then I said our conclusion I might preach from this was what he should have done in humility is he should have admitted fault. He should have taken accountability for his own actions. And then he, as we noticed in the text of 2 Chronicles 10, there's not a spot in there where it writes anyway, that he seeks God's counsel on how to lead the nation at that moment. Because it's very possible that it's exactly what God designed for that time. And Jeroboam couldn't have stopped it if he wanted to. It's very possible. But we don't know. Jeroboam could have taken a different action, a different course, and God could have done things differently. We don't know, and it doesn't say anything about him asking God. It was all he took pride. And a lot of times when man takes pride, actions in pride, God just kind of lets that ship sail. You're on that boat. He lets that ship sail that you're on, and he directs it. He oversees it. God's never out of control. Nothing surprises God, but God is so, I don't want to use the word sovereign. He's so all-powerful that he lets you make your own choices, and he still works his will out in the end. And so that's what God did with Rehoboam and Jeroboam. But when I preached this Sunday night, did anyone notice the differences from what we prepared versus what I preached? This is going back 7 days, and I know that there has a lot happened in 7 days. I had to look at my own notes to remind myself of what I preached 7 days ago, because there's a lot has happened this last week in 7 days. Every day we've been at church doing something with VBS, and my brain is fried. It is fried. You get around kids, it fries your brain. You know, they don't have any, so mine gets borrowed to them often. Christian doesn't have any. Kayla does. Jackson don't have any. His parents do. So when I preached the sermon, and I sat down for a little bit longer, I didn't preach this. I focused in on one point, which was seeking counsel. And that's what my main sermon was on. It was a lot of this stuff I didn't want to re-preach the same exact sermon that we just did in Sunday school. So it was a lot of the same, but instead I changed my theme a little bit, which is this, your point of view. I changed my point of view just a little bit to focus in on counsel and Rehoboam's pride, how he didn't seek counsel. And that's what I preached on Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. So we're gonna build another one today. We're gonna go to Psalm 127. Psalm 127. So first thing, overarching idea of building a sermon, number one thing is you're going to pray. You're going to pray. That's the biggest number one thing we're doing is we're praying. And then as we pray and we're reading a text, Psalm 127, we'll just read this whole passage here. It's not very long. Christian, grab that for me and read that chapter for me. Psalm 127. Stand up for me. Say it loud so everyone can hear you.
So he giveth his beloved sleep. Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. That shall not be ashamed. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemy at the gate.
So thank you. So this is an interesting passage because there's a couple of big main ideas in this whole chapter, I'd say, just by reading it. What do you guys think about dividing up this chapter into its main ideas? So first of all, a psalm, one of the things I like to do is I like to explore the context. The psalms are different in that they really don't have much in the way of context, right? We read the little subtitle on there, Psalm 127, A Song of Degrees for Solomon. You could do a little bit of a study on Solomon if you wanted to, but there's really not much in the way of context with most of these psalms. So, some of these psalms, there's big context. Like if you go over to Psalm 53, for example, you go over to Psalm 53, what's that? I'm sorry, it's not 53, it's 51. Psalm 51, what's that little subtitle there, say, of Psalm 51? Jackson, you got that there? Would you mind reading that? The subtitle under Psalm 51. It says, to the chief musician. Yes. Yep. Caught him napping. Psalm 51. Read that little subtitle there under Psalm 51.
The chief musician, a psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came unto him after he had gone to Bathsheba.
So, do we know the context right there with Psalm 51? After he goes to Bathsheba. So that's 2 Samuel chapter 11. I don't remember, in 1 Kings it doesn't give or in Chronicles rather, it doesn't give the story of Bathsheba because it doesn't focus on the sins in Chronicles. But 2 Samuel chapter 11 is that story, so we can totally focus in on the context of Psalm 51 if we were teaching Psalm 51. Psalm 127, don't really see much in the way of context, a little bit of Solomon. And certainly you could definitely say, read verse 1, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. There's a lot of things right there you could apply to Solomon. But if you're looking at Psalm 127, you can kind of look at this and say, look at verses 3, 4, and 5. Does that kind of look at like one theme to you, verses 3, 4, and 5? Children, verse 3, are inherited of the Lord. Verse 4, so are children of the youth. Verse 5, happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. That would be children. They shall not speak or be ashamed. They shall speak with the... Is that 3, 4, and 5 all look like the same context? Wouldn't you agree with that? So 3, 4, and 5, that's something about children. It's not 4 inches, Brother Tony. I'm sorry. And then verse 2, verses 1 and 2 kind of look like they're the same context, right? And that's kind of about not necessarily building, but it's about We'll just say building. Because part of it is, but it's not only. So specifically, let's look at verse 1. So, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Bible is very rich. There's a lot of understanding you could get into this. But verse 1, let's key in on verse 1. Psalm 127, verse 1. Except the Lord. So what I'm going to do is something in the passage grabs the attention. I've had this passage grab my attention multiple times. What are we going to do? We're going to read it over and over and over and over until we get something that grabs our attention. And then we're going to come up with picking a main idea from this passage. So, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. So somebody give me some ideas from what grabs your attention with Psalm 127, verse 1. Somebody give me a thought or an idea from Psalm 127, verse 1. We got an idea of trusting God. Okay, anyone else give me some idea from this passage? Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Someone else give me an idea.
Lean on the Lord for guidance.
Lean on the Lord. L-E-A, that's an A. Lean or guidance. Okay, I'm going to shorten that. You could say that just like that. No, if the Lord's not in it, that's perfect. All right. So that's... Anyone convicted already? Seriously. Trust God, lean for guidance, and then we got a rebuke. This is a reproof, rebuke, and exhortation. That's what this is, those three right there. All right, trusting God. So, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman laketh in vain. So, if this is our sermon, all right, these are all kind of main ideas, picking a main idea. All of these could be summed up. These are all picking the same thing, except the Lord. Let's look at our verse, and let's pick a key word here. Except the Lord build the city, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep. Did I say building? I meant to say house. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. So you have some key words there. I'm not going to write them down, but heard somebody whisper something. Except the Lord in vain. Yep, that's good. I mean, that's right. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. So we have three things here. So we're gonna learn three. We can pick one key word. This is how I build some of my sermons. As I got this passage, I got my main ideas. Those are three thoughts that jumped off the passage at me, right? We came together. These are three thoughts that came off the passage. I have three of them. I'm gonna pick a key word here, which I kind of think vain is kind of the key word. Except the Lord vain. I mean, that last point really is the main thrust of the passage. So I'm gonna say three ways to not have vanity in your life. Three ways. For vanity is my key word from the passage. You take it right out of the passage. Vanity is a key word. And three ways to avoid everything going to vanity. Three ways to avoid vanity. And what we're going to do with a passage like this is you usually want to end off with an exhortation. So we're gonna go from bottom up to this one. We're gonna close out with the exhortation, which is the positive. And we're gonna start off with point number 1, if no God, vain. So this is what I would do with this one, because talking about context, before I get into this, or I don't know, I might do this too. No God is vain. So somebody give me a couple Bible verses that deal with, what's our verses? Building the house, keeping the city. Somebody give me some Bible verses that run along this, or maybe even a story in the Bible. We were talking about that last week, Brother Dan, stories. Because what do we want to do? We want to fill the sermon in with stories. Okay, we want to fill it in with Bible verses, and we want to fill it in with stories. Okay, so give me some stories or some Bible verses that really hammer this point home right here. And I'll give you one as an example. The verse says, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. My mind immediately goes back to Jericho in the book of Joshua. Impregnable, impossible, the best built city that of the time, of the era, of the location. It was there. It was understood. No one's taken our city down except the Lord. Right? If there's no God, it's in vain. And so Jericho, no God was in vain, whereas Israel had God, and so therefore they did it. Right? So that's a good story to throw in here, is Jericho. All right? Give me one or two more verses or thoughts about that passage, or about this thought, except the Lord, it's in vain, or no God is vain. So somebody come up with a verse for me, or one or two verses there, that we can preach about that point right there. And or, Miss Carol, go ahead.
Saul, when he no longer followed God, did what he wanted instead.
Saul. Beautiful, yes. Here's a different thought. I mean, does anyone else have a Bible verse? If they don't, Cain's sacrifice. So these are all beautiful. Now, let's think of something else. Without going into personal too many details publicly, because we don't need personal, private life details, how about a personal story about you and your life, or somebody that you know of, or a story that you read, or a portion of a book? Stories. How about we get a story about, except the Lord, it was in vain? Can anyone come up with a story saying, except the Lord, it would have been in vain, or it was in vain? And if it's personal, or if it's somebody you know, we don't dishonor somebody by dragging somebody's name through the mud. We don't go into personal details some personal details don't need to be made public. Please. We all have dirty laundry. Dirty laundry doesn't need to be aired publicly. Okay, private details say private, but there's lessons to be learned from a lot of things. Right? So we can do it properly, to where, imagining that, hey, if there was, James, are you the youngest one in here? Or are you just the smallest one in here? Probably both. That's kind of what I thought. So you need to imagine, in my audience that I'm preaching to, there's a 12-year-old here. Are you 12 or 13? Or are you like 20? Huh? 12. That's what I thought. Good. I'm okay. There's a 12-year-old listening to you, or there's some ladies listening to you. You gotta remember, there's always a camera on you watching everywhere you are when you're saying. So if you're going to give personal, private details about your life, keep them rated G. And better than that, keep them rated God. Approved. Got it? All right, can anyone come up with a personal story? Somebody from the crowd, give me a personal story, either personal to you or somebody you know, or a story you once read, that they built it, but there was no God, and it was in vain. They kept it, but there was no God, and so it was vain. Any takers? Any takers? This is already preaching right here. Any takers? Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except what did I say? Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman maketh it in vain. All right, Brother Steve. Be careful now. Be careful. Go ahead.
I was reading in the book of Daniel days ago, just think of in chapter 5 about how Belshazzar the king made a great feast and he didn't include God in any of his ways. Definitely was in vain.
Belshazzar the feast, yeah. My kingdom that I built. Yeah. And that's great. That fits into these Bible story passages, all right? That's perfect. That's 100% perfect for that point. How about a personal story or a historical story? That's not Bible. Jackson. That's what I'm preaching on this morning. I didn't want to say it, but he said it. So, personal story. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. What did those guys say about the Titanic? Not even God himself could sink it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely perfect. All right, let's go on to this one. How was this worded? I shortened it. Lean not. So what are we quoting right here? Lean not into thine own understanding. What are we quoting right here? Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. We're quoting Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Everyone should have that verse memorized. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Lean not into thine own understanding. Anyone give me we got a Bible verse, so how about a story? Let's do a Bible story. Let's do this for all three of these. Let's do a scripture reference, and then let's do a Bible verse or Bible story or verse, and then let's do a personal story or historical story about lean not. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not into thine own understanding. Okay, let's think of either a story or a personal story about this. Mrs. Eaton.
Matthew 7, the wise man and the foolish man, the Lord said, if any man, don't pay attention, any man whoso heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not, he will be like unto the, and doeth them will be like unto the wise man that was the foolish.
So the wise and foolish both built a house. The wise man built his house upon a rock. Foolish man built it upon the sand. That's that story, right? Matthew chapter 7. Yeah. So, excellent. Lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. God calls himself. He says, he is the rock. The sand is not Jesus Christ. He's not shifting sand. He's a rock. So that's an awesome story. How about a personal, historical, personal to you, someone you know about others, something you read in a book, something historical, Mrs. Carroll?
For a personal one, I can remember when I was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't know whether to take treatments or just the Lord was going to heal me or what. And I was teaching, it was back when Jacob and Cassie were in preschool, and I was teaching them and doing the story on David and the lions, and I all of a sudden just stopped in the middle of the story. And it was like a quiet voice, because I'd been praying, said, it's okay, go ahead, it's going to be okay. And that's all I kept hearing. And I realized it was going to be okay, but I wouldn't even answer the doctor my decision. And they kept calling my house saying, no, he's going on vacation. We have to know your decision if you want to have surgery or treatment or what. And I said, until God tells me what to do, I'm not going to do anything. And that day when he gave me that guidance, it was just like a clear, quiet voice.
Yeah.
And I went ahead with it.
Yeah. And that's an awesome illustration because there's a couple things to be said about that. Number one, what is this doing? You're not trusting in someone else's guidance. You're trusting in the Lord, right? And she felt a burden to get a direction from the Lord in that area before she made a decision, and so that's what she did. Okay. Now, in addition to that, there has to be kind of like a guideline advice border set up. When somebody like there's going to be thousands of testimonies just like that one. I think Pastor Heaton has given a testimony just like that one, dealing with his disease that he had, the cancer. When you hear stories like that, you have to absolutely understand that that person, that lady's, that gentleman's, everyone else here, that story is unique, not unique, but personal to that individual. So you see God used it and God blessed it, right? So what do you do with a story like that? You're going to be like, well, if that's the way that person did it, that's the way I have to do it. Well, then you're reaching troubles. So these are kind of boundaries that you're setting with stories like that. And preachers need to understand this. That's the key. This is a big deal because preachers need to understand that, because when they get up and say, well, I did it this way and God took care of me, therefore you have to follow suit. That's just not true. Unless something like that is like what the principle that we're following is trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not into thy understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him and he shall direct thy paths. The principle is following there, right? That's what we're following, is that verse right there. But where in it does it say if you get cancer and you're offered treatment, or to try holistically, or just let it go and let the Lord heal it? Which verse are we looking at that specifically states if you get cancer, you take option 1, not option 2 or 3? Is there specific verses about that? I think it should be understood that no, there's not specific verses. Because what you see in the Bible over and over and over and over again is man takes multiple choice answers to do things, and it's all different to each individual person, but ultimately the person that is setting their trust and hope on the Lord, that's the one God blesses and takes them through it. You following me? So these are things we got to be careful of with these personal illustrations that we're doing. She gave a story about how God led her and she submitted herself to the Lord. I can tell you another story about a gentleman that I know who was over a missionary who was in Germany. He was a missionary to Ukraine. He was in Germany with his wife giving birth in the moment of labor. And the doctors came in and they were trying to convince them to do a C-section. And he's just like, we're not doing a C-section. The doctors were adamant. Foreign language through a translator. We're going to do a C-section. And he's just like, you're not doing a C-section. And they were adamant. We have to do a C-section. And he was like, no. And then what happened is she was in the moment of labor, something about her blood pressure dropped. No, her heart rate? The baby's heart rate. The baby was in breech. Yeah. And then the heart rate of the baby dropped, which to them, that's code red signals. And they're like, doctors, they did an emergency call for doctors to come in for an emergency C-section, and he was fighting to the last breath. Now, this is crazy stuff. He just had peace from the Lord at that moment he said, the Lord's going to take care of this. The same exact thing she's saying. And as those doctors were emergency called them in, they came in from other operations but didn't have time to change their gloves. It was like seconds to spare. These doctors came in with blood on their hands to do an emergency last second C-section on this woman to save the baby's life. You following me? You say, well, this is disastrous. Yeah, it is, except as they all came in there and they had that thing on there for the ultrasound, they all came in there ready to do this C-section, and they all watched as that baby flipped itself around and the heart rate popped up to normal and she had a normal delivery. You say, what is that? That is a man who had his heart right with the Lord, that was seeking God's attention, and at that particular moment chose to take a stand for what he believed God was telling him. And should anyone else here do that? No. No one else here should do that exact same story ever. What you should do is you should take your own walk with the Lord and have a relationship with God for him to tell you in your life those kind of stories. And then you should have, at the end of your life, a set of collection of stories personal to you. And that's what you have to keep those things as personal items to you and not without. Did they ever have a C-section with any of their babies? You think they did, didn't they, with their last one, or they're closer to the end? Yeah. So you have to be careful with these individual stories. Now, I've heard somebody say this once, and I apologize if Miss Carroll thinks I'm attacking her story, because this is not. I'm not attacking her story. I'm praising the Lord. Somebody please give a personal testimony of how God led them to do something. Please. Somebody please talk about how everyone was saying this is the way to do it. I just didn't have peace from the Lord to do it, and so I didn't do it because I wanted to follow this verse, to trust in the Lord with all my heart. I was trying to lean onto his understanding. Please, I beg of you, do that. Do something with your life where you're putting God in preeminence, right? I'm giving just the warnings, because when a guy gets up here to give those illustrations, you're going to be like, well, that's me. I'm going to do that. Please do something, but don't follow that thing to the T, because God led that man to do it that way, right? And let God lead you to do things, right? I heard a guy talk about when we give out tracts, we were passing out tracts, and I was with a group of people, and we were, you follow a chain of command in a group of people, and one guy was saying, we were overseas, and one guy was saying, if people throw down tracts, I want you to go behind, we want to clean up our area. We're working a lot of people in an area handing out tracts, and this guy was like, when we leave this area, we want to leave it clean, so when we're done, we're going to walk around the area, we're going to pick up the tracts, because people are going to naturally throw them away, we're going to pick them up, we're going to collect them so that we leave the area clean when we leave. Sound like good advice? To me, it sounds like a pretty good advice, but somebody says, we shouldn't do that because I know of a story where somebody threw a track away and somebody later came by and picked through the trash and found a track, and they got saved because they read that track through the trash. Or vice versa. I think actually this particular story, the track was on the ground. It was discarded somewhere on the ground somewhere, and somebody walked by and picked it up and read it. And so therefore, this guy came to the conclusion that you should never pick up tracts that are ever thrown on the ground ever. Just like, so I remember a story of somebody lying. I remember somebody inviting somebody to go to a church meeting, lying, and saying the pastor was going to preach on science because he knew this person was interested in science. And so he lied to invite this person to church because he's going to preach on science. He never preached on science, never promised he was going to preach on science. It wasn't on the advertisement he was going to preach on science. But the guy who invited his friend lied. The guy came to church, and guess what happened? He got saved. And so therefore, I come to the conclusion that it's okay to lie to get people to come to church just as long as they can hear the gospel. How's that sound? It's never right to do wrong, good chance to do right. So how about this? I serve a God who wants to use sinners, and he loves using sinners and our mistakes for his glory. How about that? Can we leave it at that? And then these personal illustrations and stories, let them be what they are. When he or he or he or he or she or she or she or he, if any one of you guys gets up and gives a story of how God blessed you because you decided to follow this verse, let it be a praise of the Lord specific to that, and let's figure out ways how we can do that with our own lives, personal, okay? So that's a word of warning, because you have to give words of warnings. When we're going to give stories, some people get up, they give too gory details. We don't care about gory details, okay? Some people get up and give stories and say, so that's what you have to do. That's not what you have to do, ever. You need to trust in the Lord with all your heart, and in all your ways acknowledge him. That's what. If any preacher gets up and tries to tell you anything different than that, don't listen to him. And there's lots of preachers that do that. Okay. All right. So that was fantastic, Mrs. Carr. I really appreciate you for giving that story. How about this one right here? Trusting God. If God didn't do it, there's no God, it's in vain. What you need to do is you need to lean, and we're going to talk about trusting God. And really, everything we just talked about could be reapplied to this verse right here. Right? But how about trusting God? Let's get a verse and a story and a personal illustration. And we'll probably call it a day here. So how about a verse? So this is about not following your own guidance, not following your own wisdom. Okay, how about this one right here, trusting God? So think about this as we go back to our text, which is Psalm 127, verse 1. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh in vain. This whole verse is built upon trust in God. Because I can build a house. I have the know-how. How many in here have the know-how that you could start basically from scratch and you could build a house from scratch to where you could live in it? Who in here has that knowledge? You wouldn't raise your hand? You wouldn't raise your hand? You had a thought. He's thinking. There's at least 4 people in here, possibly more, that have the knowledge that could start from scratch and build a house from zero to get it to where you could live in it. I'm not saying it has to be perfect, okay, gentlemen? I'm not saying it has to be code worthy, because I'm not there at all. And don't hire me because I'm not hiring anybody. I'm not hireable. But what are we doing with this? We're getting it to where we're not trusting our own understanding of things, because listen, I want to build this church, right? But I don't understand. I have to put my own. I have a vision for our church. Every pastor should. But ultimately, I have no idea if my vision is one that's good or right or long term or going to be what God wants and what's going to be useful for anything. I could totally build a church after my own image that would be ultimately destructive and harmful and cause more harm than good, kind of thing, right? When we're saying this, we're saying what I'm doing with my house and with my security. So if you could even break this, I just thought of this right now. You could break this down into 2 parts where you're talking about planning and building your future, versus the second half of that is security of your present. Building your future, so your plans, your desires, your goals, versus your security of what you have, and of course your future as well. Okay, when you're doing those things, you absolutely have to step out of the picture and give it to God. And trust God. Okay, so knowing that, what's a verse and a Bible story and a personal story that we can throw into this part about how important it is to letting your life be lived as trusting God? Okay, anyone got any verses or personal stories or Bible stories that relied on those things? What was it? Asa. Oh, you had to pick one, didn't you? Asa is a Bible story. Okay, tell me, what about Asa? Somebody attacked him. Yeah.
And it was, they were way outnumbered, and it was, by human standards, foolish, but he trusted in the Lord and the Lord took them.
Okay, so there's a Bible story. How about a Bible? Yes, Dan?
Well, I was thinking about Sennacherib and Hezekiah there.
Hezekiah.
And it says there is that he's flaunting them, the people there, trying to get them to not trust in God, but Hezekiah is telling them to trust in the Lord.
I think Sennacherib or his prince told him, if we can give you horses, as long as if you have as many people as you have, you could set upon our horses that we're going to give you. So yeah, security. All right. How about a personal story? And we'll close out the day with somebody's personal story here. About the need of trusting the Lord. Personal story, either historical or something you know of somebody else or personal to you. Sarah's got her hand up. Anyone else before I give it over to her? Anyone else? Brother Don, you got to give a story, don't you? You're thinking of one, aren't you?
I was after you? Like to say you're driving down a road and something tells you maybe you want to slow down a little bit. Or you see somebody on the street and something tells you to go talk to him.
Trusting God. Yeah. Yeah. Trusting God when you lose a farm. Yeah. Amen. Sarah?
I was just gonna say, when we were in Ukraine and there was talk of Russia on the border, it didn't make sense for us to stay, but we were trusting God and didn't have peace to leave at that time until he gave us peace to leave.
Yeah. And that's another one of those. There's a principle, don't leave just because Russia's on your border. That's a principle versus we had peace to stay at that moment, but we did leave. And so someone else could come along and say, well, they should have stayed because they fled when no man was blah, 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 which they have. But don't be that dumb. Okay, anyone else got something to say before we close it out? Anyone else got something to say? Mm-hmm.
Say one of my biggest historical ones is the story of Corrie ten Boom.
Tell us about it.
She didn't always necessarily trust God. She followed after her father's example first, and then she trusted God to a certain extent, but she went after her sister's testimony, her sister's encouragement until her sister died. She trusted the Lord, and she just went along with everything without making a big splash. She trusted the Lord through every situation. Why she had the insights in her rooms, and like trusting the Lord through all that, and then realizing later on that you were released when you should have actually been put to death.
Corey. And so, was she Dutch or German? Dutch. Corey. How do you spell her name? Is that probably not how you spell it, but it is. Oh, capital B. So she started off just following the faith of her father, and then got to a spot where she personally committed her life to the Lord and trusted God to protect her while she did her fights for the Jews and others too, right? It wasn't just Jews.
All the people that the Nazis were trying to
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. That's perfect. So honestly, there's probably too much information here for preaching a sermon, right? But this is what we're talking about. This is the process of what I do when I'm building a sermon. And we'll just go over a couple more examples of these in the future weeks as well. So God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the time that we've had together as a church. Lord, we love you.